Podcast number 3. Walter Rodney. On a bright sunny day in Georgetown, Guyana, a loud explosion rocked the neighborhood just outside the eastern walls of the prison in Camp Street. That sound marked the moment that Walter Rodney was killed. It was June 13, 1980, but who was Walter Rodney? Hi there. And welcome once again to Forgotten Stories from Guyana and the Caribbean, with Aaron Darcy. I am your host Aaron Darcy. Thanks for joining me on this journey through time as we explore some of the events that shaped the history of Guyana and the Caribbean. Walter Rodney was born on the 23rd of March in 1942. He was a Guyanese historian and academic, but was much more well known, especially in Guyana, for his political activism. Walter Rodney became the most charismatic of the leaders of the Working People's Alliance, one of the more vibrant opposition parties in Guyana back in the 1970s. You see, the official opposition party, the PPP, was generally considered to be weak-hearted and offered no actual opposition to the power of the ruling PNC party. When Rodney joined the WPA, it attracted many of those Guyanese who had become disgusted with both the PNC and the PPP. And this was a time in Guyana when no one dared question the power of the then ruling party and its leader, Forbes Burnham. Rodney did challenge the status quo, and he appears to have paid for that with his life. Rodney's WPA political meetings were often broken up by PNC thugs, who were mainly members of the House of Israel, and so, people were at great risk to life and limb for attending these meetings and rallies. This House of Israel was a very shady organization that had become a part of the Guyanese political scene, its leader having arrived in Guyana from another shady background in the US. Under Rodney's leadership, the WPA came to be known as the Party for All Guyanese, because the two main political parties at that time were each perceived to represent their own kind, meaning the PNC for black people and the PPP for Indian or Coolie people. And so Rodney and the WPA gained support from a wide cross-section of Guyana's ethnic groups, and especially from among younger people who had grown up in an environment of fear, misunderstanding and mistrust of politics and politicians, and who had become intolerant of their political heritage. Rodney told the Guyanese people that the different ethnic groups needed to work together for the good of the country, but this was a position that challenged Burnham's hold on power. Walter Rodney described Burnham as a dictator who oppressed and exploited different classes of the Guyanese people, including some of his own kind who refused to support his dictatorship and surrounded himself with weak and corrupt individuals so that he could control the people in his own party. Walter Rodney's influence spread among the people of Guyana and presented a very serious threat to the ruling elite, and subsequently, whether by design or accident, Walter Rodney was killed. His brother, Donald Rodney, who was injured in the explosion, said that a sergeant in the Guyana Defense Force, who was also a member of the House of Israel, had given Walter the bomb that killed him. It is widely believed that the assassination, if it was an assassination, was set up by those within Guyana's ruling political elite at that time, but this was never proven. Walter Rodney was much more than a great political hope for the people of Guyana. He had traveled widely and had become known internationally as an activist, scholar and a formidable orator. He taught at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania from 1966 to 1967 and again from 1969 to 1974. In 1968 he held a prominent position at the University of the West Indies at Mona campus, Jamaica, and was very critical of the middle class for its role in the post-independence Caribbean, and was an ardent critic of capitalism. This attitude did not sit well with some powerful people, even in the Caribbean, and so on the 15th of October 1968, the Hugh Shearer government of Jamaica banned him from ever returning to Jamaica, and he was dismissed from the University of the West Indies. What followed was widespread protests by university students and regular people in some sections of West Kingston. This created a new sense of political awareness across the Caribbean and heavily influenced some Rastafarians. Rodney later described this series of incidents in his book, The Groundings with My Brothers. In 1969, Rodney again returned to the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and took up a position of senior lecturer there in 1971, and in 1973 was promoted to associate professor. Rodney had been close to C.L.R. James, among others. He was also supportive of the socialist government of Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, and he worked to spread knowledge in Tanzanian villages. He was fluent in Kiswahili, the language of the Tanzanian people. So this Guyanese scholar was very active in promoting Pan-African activism and wrote about the causes of Africa's underdevelopment, in his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. At the Pan-African Congress of 1974, Rodney presented a paper on the international class struggle in Africa, the Caribbean and America. And during this time was quite influential in the Black Power movement in the Caribbean and North America. When Rodney returned to Guyana in 1974, he was denied a position at the University of Guyana, and so he became increasingly active in politics. He joined the Working People's Alliance, WPA, and helped create a movement that presented the most effective and credible challenge to the People's National Congress government. Rodney told the Guyanese people that they should replace the ethnic politics of that time with a revolutionary nationalism, and this of course did not sit well with the ruling elite. In 1979, Rodney was arrested and charged with arson after 2 government offices were burned to the ground. In those days, government offices and ministry buildings often went up in flames whenever questions arose about their financial operations. More often than not, blame was cast upon somebody opposed to the ruling party. And so in 1979, Rodney was accused of one such incident, but the trial was deferred 3 times and later dropped due to lack of evidence. On June 13, 1980, Rodney was killed in Georgetown, at the age of 38, by a bomb explosion in his car, and this happened at a time of intense political activism. This was almost 1 year after the stabbing to death of a Catholic priest, Father Dark, by members of the House of Israel. For many years after, questions remained on the minds of many Guyanese and West Indians about the events that led up to Rodney's death, and who was responsible, and at a commission of inquiry held in 2014, under a PPP government, new information was revealed. The Commission of Inquiry did conclude that Rodney's death had been a state-ordered killing, and that the ruling party at that time must have had knowledge of the plot. The death of Dr. Walter Rodney caused many to reflect on his teachings and his influence on the peoples of Africa, the US and of course Guyana and the Caribbean. Upon Rodney's death, many thought that the world had lost a powerful and creative mind because Walter Rodney had achieved that special distinction of intellectual leadership among Guyanese and people of the Caribbean. His contributions are considered to be of equal importance as those of Marcus Garvey, George Padmore and C.L.R. James. Walter Rodney was regarded as among the best of the UWI. A brilliant young intellectual, rooted in Caribbean development discourse, a student demonstrating extraordinary intellectual gifts in and around African and Caribbean history and translating that knowledge into community activism, representing the intersection between scholarship and social activism. He is well remembered for his life's work. In 1977, the African Studies Center at Boston University inaugurated the Walter Rodney Lecture Series, and in 1998, the Institute of Caribbean Studies at the University of the West Indies inaugurated the Walter Rodney Lecture Series. In 2006, the Walter Rodney Essay Competition was established in the Department of Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan in the US, and in that same year, the Walter Rodney Foundation was established by the Rodney family. The foundation is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and aims to share the works and legacy of Rodney with the world. In 2010, the Walter Rodney Commemorative Symposium was held at York College in Queens, New York, and the Department of African American Studies at Syracuse University established the Angela Davis Walter Rodney Award of Academic Achievement. Rodney is the subject of the 2010 documentary film by Claremont Chung, entitled WAR Stories, Walter Anthony Rodney. In 1993, the Guyanese government posthumously awarded Walter Rodney Guyana's highest honor, the Order of Excellence of Guyana. The Guyanese government also established the Walter Rodney Chair in History at the University of Guyana. Hopefully, we have learned something about this son of Guyana, Walter Anthony Rodney. Thank you for joining me on this journey back in time where we delve into the history of Guyana and the Caribbean. I look forward to sharing so much more with you and hope you join me in the next episode of Forgotten Stories from Guyana and the Caribbean, with Aaron Darcy. Goodbye for now.